My name is Lewis Startler, and I'm very excited to be invited to speak at Fab 16, speaking remotely to Montreal and around the world. I'm a research scientist based in London, based at the University of Westminster, and alongside my scientific research, I've been involved in a lot of public outreach, science communication, engagement, and including writing, including science journalism and writing popular science books. And the topic I've been asked to present about for Fab 16 is on my previous popular science book called The Knowledge, How to Rebuild Our World from Scratch. Because at the very core of this book, it's an exploration of many different subjects and topics, but also very much at the heart of what Fab 16 is all about, the Fab Lab community is all about, makers and plants. It's all about human ingenuity and resourcefulness and working out how to make and do things for yourself from scratch, how to use different substances, different materials, how to manufacture, craft, design new tools, and then use those tools together in different combinations with each other to build ever more complex devices and gadgets and pieces of technology to make our lives easier. And the book that I wrote for The Knowledge is a thought experiment. And I want you to imagine that something like this has actually, there's been some kind of global catastrophe, a doomsday event, an apocalypse, and civilization has collapsed, and the majority of the human race has perished. But we've survived. Let's say we were able to get to a fortuitously placed bunker just in time, and we have survived the end of the world, and everything else has collapsed and destroyed around us. And in the next 45 minutes or so, when I finish talking, we're going to go out blinking in the bright daylight of a new world, some kind of post-apocalyptic wasteland. And the question that will be on our lips by that point is, what do I most need to know, or to make, or to do in order to survive, in order to keep myself alive when civilization and supermarkets are no longer doing that for me? But even more interesting is, how could you go about building a society for itself? Could you reboot civilization itself in a way that you would reduce after its crash? How could you navigate some kind of shortcut routes to this great network of interconnected scientific discoveries and inventions and technologies that we all just take for granted in our modern everyday lives? In principle, as a thought, I don't actually think we're all yet. I think imagining post-apocalyptic sounds a great way of holding up a mirror for our modern day lives and asking, how does it all work behind the scenes? What do you take for granted? Where does it come from? How is it manufactured? How is it made? Where is it harvested from? How can I do that for myself? I appreciate the way it works now. But also to explore our own history of progress and development of 20 years of how we got from living in caves and the invention of agriculture and emergence of civilization. So what I'm really talking about in this book, in The Knowledge, is, could you do this for you? Could you bring my Minecraft book in the world, start a blank, empty landscape, and know where to go to harvest what you need from that world? How that's useful to you, and use that to make something else, and recreate a relatively vast, technological, industrial society for yourself from the ground up. I And this is what I try to do with this book. But the main themes that I explore, these are the chapters of the book. I wrote everything from agriculture, I mentioned the star to get the very fundamentals of substances, materials, basic chemistry, the essence of medicine, the technologies for communication and transport. Let's imagine, just for time being, that we are in this hypothetical book. This topic is why not the world is right, this country. And we're trying to work out how to get there, how to survive. I'm not dying, perish. That's what it means. And the first thing that we in mind is why are we trying to farm? Well, you need it often. All you need to do is get the nearest abandoned, deserted supermarket and just help yourself to the cans and tins and dried something to keep points. Now I wanted to answer another thought attempt. Let's imagine that I was to be locked in an average supermarket and the key was thrown away and I go to spend the rest of my natural life in this single supermarket. How long could I survive before I either eaten all the food that was there or it was gone off before I get found eating? And I calculated, I went to an average supermarket in London and I walked up and down every aisle with pen and paper, counting everything that was there. I'm getting some burial books that come through those shops. And I multiplied up all of the edible sustenance in the supermarket, divided it by the amount of meat you could buy. And the answer comes out that a single supermarket keeps one person alive for 55 years, or 63 years if we happen to eat all the canned pork food that was there. Now, clearly, this is a frivolous example. But what I'm trying to get at is the reason that all of us living in the modern, developed world no longer fear the commitment, no longer fear famine, starvation. Because as a society, civilization, we are able to apply our knowledge and understanding, it's not just reliably grow food, but to also preserve it. To stop that food going up, eaten by pests or mold or bacteria before the person needed. Invented the canning process. And more recently, learned how to exploit boiled gas laws to make little pockets, little boxes of artificial winter. That's not a refrigerator or freezer in the picture. It's a technological exploitation of our understanding of the laws of the nature. Now, it's not just food that's going to be right at the top of the food apocalyptic to be this. Water is going to be one of your top priorities. You need to be able to answer the question. You need to be able to know that the water you're about to put to your lips and drink isn't going to kill you. It's not laced with chlorine or any number of other waterborne diseases that have been the scourge of humanity for hundreds of thousands. Now, it turns out that actually can very readily chemically disinfect it if we do it by using nothing other than kitchen bleach, stabbing an abandoned house or deserted supermarket, and provided you dilute that bleach and in it, the chemical in that bleach, sodium hypochlorite, will chemically disinfect that water, kill the bugs and stop the bugs. And if you can't find any kitchen bleach, then swimming pool chlorine, calcium hypochlorite will do exactly the same. You are exporting the chemistry of chlorine in drinking water. So, and the idea of drinking bleach on a daily basis for it seems odd or extreme. You're doing that every day of your life. The municipal water supply in cities and nations around the world is made safe by exposed chemistry of chlorine. actually, there's an even simpler technique that you can use to purify water to make a fact that's safe. And this is known as SOLIS, or solar disinfection. All you need to do is put the suspect water in a plastic bottle. You filter it first before melting into sediment. You put that water into a plastic bottle, leave it out, direct. And because you effectively constrain that water to very shallow, the ultraviolet rays, the UV rays of sunlight, will shine straight through that water bottle and kill or inactivate any bacteria in the air. Come back a bit or two later, pick up that bottle, drink it, and know for fact because of science. It's basic microbiology, you can handle it, that water is not safe. Now, fire, of course, has been utterly critical to how we live our life as a species. We use for thousands of years, we use fire to cook our food, to keep the cold at bay. And on a more fundamental level, as a society, we use fire to transform the base substances we can dig out of the ground and turn it into the most useful materials and substances of history. We use fire to turn clay, or rivermud, into bricks that we build. We use clay to get metal out of rocks. Now, despite just how useful application fire is, I suspect there's not many people living in modern cities today that actually know how to make fire. Would you get something along? Would you get something to burn? You can't just reach for a melter or box of matches. I myself don't have the first idea about how to rub sticks together to start a fire. But it turns out that people, again, using ingenuity and then scavenging and foraging from normal everyday items in supermarkets, you can use these everyday items in ingenious and weird and wonderful new ways to start a fire and possibly save your life. And ironically, you can even start a fire using a fire alarm. But the very thing we invented to warn us of fire, you can use to start one. I'm not going to do that right now. To show you that. So I've got a video which you can watch in full if you want to go to the book's website, which is .org. But it's showing you how you can start a fire using a fire alarm. And the trick behind this is to take out the battery from inside the fire. The standard 9-volt battery is got the two terminals inside, which makes it very easy to short circuit this battery. And be careful if you do this. And what you need to do is brush some wire wool, some steel wool, again scavenged from the abandoned house or the reserve supermarket, against those two terminals of the battery, and short circuit it, and that will burst into flames. Now, what's astonishing about that demonstration, about that video is that's not dry kindling or paper or bits of twigs or straw catching light. That is the metal itself bursting into flames. You could, in principle, use that life hack, that post-apocalyptic survival life hack, to save your life if you ever need to. And what you're actually doing is exploiting the principle of electrical resistance. You're taking electric current from the battery, you're forcing it through a very narrow, fine wire with very high electrical resistance, which generates a lot of heat, so that the wire then bursts. And if you can pull off that same trick of passing electricity through a very narrow wire and not have it burst in flames, you just invented something very, very useful. You invented the electric light bulb. It's solving that problem, that trick, which took Edison years and years of forging and hacking and trial and error to invent the first workable electric light bulb, something that transformed the way we live our lives today. We no longer have to go to bed at dusk when the sun sets, or to rise up at dawn. We can flip a switch in the corner of the room and have an artificial sun appear in the centre of that room to light up our lives again. Electricity is, of course, core and fundamental to how we live our lives in the modern world. And there's one example that I want to give you of our own recent history, but there's a phenomenal example of this sort of Fab Lab type ethos of human ingenuity and resourcefulness and perseverance in the face of adversity, which is demonstrated by inhabitants of this city here. This is called Glasgow. And during the Open War, this modern city was cut off from the rest of the world, was isolated, surrounded by the army, isolated from the rest of the world. And although they received medical drops, first aid drops by air, they had been severed from electrical, they were thrown back to the dark ages in terms of their access to electricity. And the inhabitants of Glasgow were ingenious, and they solved this problem by dodging and hacking and jury-rigging what you can see tethered behind this bridge, this black and white picture here, which are jury-rigged water wheels. They took in junk, scrap they could find lying around their city. They used their tools to machine and construct water wheels out of that junk. And the core component of this water wheel for generating electricity was a alternator from a plant. A simple generator that converts that rotation from this medieval style water wheel to electricity, and pass on wires back to the bridge or back to the side of the river so they could charge their technology, keep their lifestyles electrified during this localized, near apocalyptic scenario of being isolated during the major war. I think this is an incredible example, as I say, of human ingenuity and resourcefulness. But let's move on now from what I talk about in the book Knowledge is the grace period. Immediately after this post-apocalyptic event, you can scavenge and forage for them. Sooner or later, that will have run out. You'll use everything lying around. It will have gone off, it will have decayed, it will have rotted, it will have deteriorated. And so within that grace period, being able to simply coast what's been left behind from the previous civilization, then in that grace period, you're going to have to work out how to make and do things from scratch yourself. To start that process of recovery and rebooting civilization rather than just scavenging what you find lying. And I wanted to pick out a couple of examples from the knowledge from the book of different areas of our capability in providing for ourselves and supporting our society. And we'll start with arguably the most important aspect, which is agriculture and how we can ensure we don't starve to death. And the very centre of this is something which I think is a very, very important question that has perhaps never really occurred to me in the past. Why is it that every morning of our lives, for breakfast, we eat a bowl of cereal, maybe a bowl of rice, or a bowl or a slice of toast? We eat the products of cereal crops, such as wheat, or maize, or barley, or rice. Why is it that we eat these cereal crops? And these cereal crops, which you can see from the left here, are wheat, rice, and maize. These are the plant species that have supported every civilization history around the world. And these are all species of rice. Humanity is no different from the goats or the cows or sheep that we eat out of pasture. We rely on eating species of rice. The problem is we don't have 4 stomachs like a cow to actually have to break down and digest most of the plant material in rice. So rather than applying our stomachs to the problem, we have to apply our brains. We have to invent technologies that enable us to eat the bullets, the concentrated nutrition, and the grain of cereal crops like wheat and maize. And the technology invented specifically for eating wheat have been the Roman water wheel in the left, and more recent history, the medieval windmill. These are clear technologies for harnessing renewable energy sources of wind and water, hydropower. And what they are doing is using simple mechanisms, such as gears, to harness the energy and use it to turn a sandwich of two rocks past each other, which are the millstones. This is at the very heart of the water wheel and the wind. And that millstone is used to grind the wheat into flour, and we use that flour to bake bread. Again, we're using the transformative power of fire and heat to release and unlock the nutrients that our body can absorb from the wheat. So in real sense, this whole technology is supplementary to agriculture, but enabling us to eat in cereal crops and species of grass. The millstone is like a set of technological teeth. It grinds up the grain, save our jaws if we do that hard work. And the oven that we use to bake bread, or the pot of boiling water we use to boil vegetables, is like an external pre-digestive system. We've invented technologies that enable us to extract the nutrients we need from plants and grass. Now, really like this system, I'm thinking, right, so I get that the wheat and maize and rice are quite important for doing this. I get this water wheel is a bit of a big deal. How is this actually going to help us if we are in this scenario of post-apocalyptic, for example, trying to recover society for us? Where do we go to actually get wheat seeds or maize wheat? That's not the sort of thing savage from the random supermarket. If we did need to reboot civilization, this is where you could go. It's called the Svalbard Global Seaport, and it is a facility built into the side of a mountain way up in the Arctic circle, right up close to the North Pole, on a region island of Svalbard. And it is effectively a library, a repository of the seeds of every major crop species that people around the planet today eat. And it is in the surface of even if there were to be some kind of apocalyptic collapse, this facility will remain naturally refrigerated for thousands of years to preserve those seeds. Go there, you can harvest what you need, like bring it back to the fields. Now, if you don't know where the Svalbard Global Seaport is, I very helpfully on the slide here provided for you at the bottom the coordinates, the latitude and longitude, the address of where this seaport can be found. And if you don't know what that set of coordinates means, well, just important if you don't know what your address where you are right now, and therefore the direction you need to head in and how far you have to go, you don't know how to navigate that set of coordinates. All you need to do is turn to that chapter in the book, Knowledge, or explain the first principles from absolute scratch, the nature of navigation, and how to determine where the planet you are, and what direction you're in to any other place. Very core of navigation. Everything in the knowledge, everything in the book, links to everything else. Doesn't assume an answer. Totally complete in that sense as far as. Now, within the theme of transport, what we would really hope we can prevent happening to a post-apocalyptic society is for it to slide backwards and regress to a state like this, where you've lost mechanization, you've lost machinery, you've lost engines, you don't know how to get a petrol or diesel or gasoline fuel, and you don't know how to refine crude oil to make it, or you don't know how to make the spare parts, the components of an engine, keep it running. And like this chap in the picture here, he had to chop off the useless front end of an automobile or a car, throw it away, and make for yourself some kind of post-apocalyptic Mad Max chariot and the back end of the car, and hitch it up to giraffe animals. To again go back to medieval technology to move things around. As far as possible, you want to keep engines and machinery running during the recovery process. You don't want to go back to walking 20 miles on your feet or doing the back-breaking labour of mining or quarrying or making things yourself with your own muscles. So the question here is, how can you keep modern engines, internal combustion engine, machinery running if you no longer have access to crude oil, or petrol, gasoline, refined from them? And it turns out that amazingly, you can run a car using nothing more than wood as fuel. And to explain how that's possible, I've got another short video for you here of a very simple piece of technology that I built from scratch in about an hour or two when I was researching and writing this book, which is called a gasifier stove. You can see it in the bottom of this picture here. And what it really is, what this simple gasifier stove is a large outer tin can with a hole cut in the top, where I position a smaller tin can in the middle, and I drill a bunch of holes in the bottom of both the tin cans. And to get this gasifier stove running, you put some fuel in the inner tin can and you light it. And I'll show you in this short video how that gasifier stove works. I don't get to demonstrate this live anyway. I did this for a talk I was doing for TED, on the main TED stage a couple of years ago, and I'd been a bit nervous beforehand, and I'd forgotten just how much hairspray they put on my head before pushing out onto the stage and me standing in a big red spot of doom in the middle of the TED stage. And I came that close to setting fire to my own head while I was demonstrating this gasifier stove. So I will show you the video here safely rather than trying to demonstrate that for you live. Now, what you can see in the video here, and again, you can watch the whole video on the book's website, is the gasifier stove made out of the bigger and the smaller tin can. And what I'm doing at the moment is just loading some kindling, some old newspaper or some straw or something down at the bottom of that inner tin can, and then putting a small handful of small twigs, little bits of wood into that tin can. So we light that fuel through the air holes at the bottom, and just like any barbecue, the air holes draw through a good current of air, of oxygen. As I put that chimney on, you can see that this gasifier stove is also sometimes referred to as a rocket stove, because when it's up and running now, it will generate a good 3 or 4 foot jet of flame coming out the top of that small, that punch there. That's when we set fire to my hair when I was doing this live on the TED stage. Don't do that. This gasifier stove will generate a jet several feet high of flame because it's so efficient at turning that fuel into energy. And what it's doing is breaking down the complex compounds and molecules in the wood to release gases. It's gasifying the fuel, which the gases are coming off, and then because there's a row of air holes right at the top of that stove, oxygen is reintroduced into that flammable mixture of gas and burning all of that. The gas stove is incredibly efficient at turning fuel into flames, into thermal energy, because it is gasifying that wood first. The wood itself isn't burning, the wood is going to turn into gas, and we're burning gas. This gasifier stove is very, very similar to a gas stove burning natural gas you might have in the kitchen at home. And this sort of gasifier stove, which is very, very simple to make yourself, and it's smokeless because you're burning the smoke for that gasification process. It's also much healthier, you're not breathing that smoke in. So it's the perfect kind of appropriate technology, or intermediate technology it's called, for people perhaps in the developing world. There are a number of development agencies that are teaching people in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, how to build and use their own gasifier stoves to cook their meals much more healthy, much more fuel efficient. also do is take your gasifier stone, scale it up from something the size of a very small tin can, scale up to something the size of a dustbin or a trash can, strap it to the back of the car, and you can run a car using wood as fuel rather than diesel or petrol or gasoline. And on the back of that car, there you can see where the gasifier unit is placed. The wood at the bottom of that is breaking down the heat of the central combustion to give off the gases, which then being piped over the roof of that car, down under the bonnet, and being injected into the cylinders of the engine. And only then that gas mixture is being allowed to mix with oxygen and explode usefully to drive the car forward. Now, I would admit this does look an awful lot like some kind of harebrained, crackpot, Mad Max, post-apocalyptic contraption. But these gasifier cars, they work. They work perfectly well. And in fact, during the Second World War, and when both sides of the war in Europe got very good at blowing up each other's oil refineries during the fuel shortages of the Second World War, there were over 1 million gasifier-powered vehicles, wood-burning cars, keeping society running during this localized disruption of the World War II. So it's not that crazy at all. We're talking about wood-powered cars and keeping this post-apocalyptic society going using this kind of slightly more simple, slightly more primitive technology, because again, this is a robust example of it from our own recent history of human ingenuity. Now, within the realm of materials, one of the most critical substances, or the most critical materials in the whole of human history, has been the very material that has enabled us to do modern science in the way that we do, the way that we ask questions of the natural world, explore the world around us, understand its patterns and its laws, and then come to be able to exploit that understanding, inventing new technologies. And the goal of the age of science, the scientific revolution back in the early 1500s, was as much about the invention of the tools we need for doing science, measuring things in the world, studying how they change. And this used scientific instruments such as the thermometer, measuring temperature, or the barometer, measuring pressure, the telescope for being able to see things very far away and understanding our place in the cosmos, or the microscope for seeing invisibly tiny and understanding about germs and microbiology. Now, almost all of these instruments, these tools for doing science, for understanding the natural world and being able to exploit that to inventing new technologies, almost all of those scientific instruments utterly rely on a single substance. A substance with a unique combination of properties, something which is relatively strong, something which is chemically inert, doesn't react to the things you put in. You can study chemistry. And it's also completely transparent. You can see through it to see what's changing, what's happening inside the thermometer. And this substance, of course, is glass. Without glass, you cannot make most of the scientific instruments you need to study the world and make greater inventions. And it turns out that the raw materials you need to make glass can all be harvested on the same beach. You can get the silica you need from sand, you can get the calcium carbonate that you need for stabilizing the glass mixture, and you can get the flux, the thing that you use to add to the sand so it can melt to the sort of temperature you can reach in a kiln. You can get from seaweed, potash or soda ash you can extract from things like seaweed you find on a beach, or burning it and extracting soda ash from the ashes of that seaweed. And I wanted to do this Robinson Crusoe experiment. I wanted to go to a deserted beach and harvest for myself, do Minecraft, collect the raw materials from around me, to make some glass from scratch in a single weekend. Now, I didn't get to go to this beach. You can see here, this is a beautiful beach. This is a picture I found on Google Images. So say I had to go to a beach in Norfolk, in southeast England, where it pissed with rain the entire time that I was there, and it was pretty miserable. But on this beach, I was able to find pure red sand, like glass, some glass rot, which is similar to seaweed, and you extract the flux, glass making from it, the soda ash, and also some chalk or some calcium carbonate. And I ground up and processed the very simple means these raw materials I collected, put them all together in a hot place, the glass making kiln that would use some fuel and iron to make very hot. And I made my own glass from scratch. Just to put my money on the markers, this is the glass here that I made in this Robinson Crusoe experiment, but then right back to basics, making something from scratch myself. And in principle, you could turn this glass into test tubes or tubes for a thermometer, or you can mold it into a particular shape to make a glass lens for controlling light itself and magnifying light to build a telescope or microscope. You can do this Robinson Crusoe experiment and rebuild science from scratch when you know the basic ingredients and the process you need to go through. Now, another example I wanted to briefly tell you about is in the area of communication. One of the critical developments in our own history was the invention of the printing press. Because before the printing press, if you wanted to copy a document or a book, the only way of doing that was by hand, was to fill an entire room full of scribes who would copy that manuscript, literally that manuscript, letter by letter in handwriting, and it's incredibly laborious and time-consuming and ultimately expensive. So only rich and powerful people or institutions get to choose which documents can be copied, what human knowledge is disseminated and shared and permeates through your society. But with the invention of the printing press and this means of mass producing books and ideas and human thought, understanding knowledge itself became democratized, became democratic. Anyone could copy any book they wanted very, very cheaply. Knowledge spread much more widely across society. This was entirely transformative, not just for the way we do science and understand things and the technology we can build, but fundamentally the way that our society works. So I explain the book how to make a printing press, how to make a book from scratch. If you want to see this, I've also got a TEDx video you can find up online about how to make a book from absolute scratch. But this is the simplified technology tree, if you like, of how to turn raw materials from the natural world into a book and a printing press for mass producing human ideas. And just again to put my money where my mouth is, in the pages of the book of the knowledge, I explain how to make this printing press. And so it's almost as if this book has got the genetic instructions for its own reproduction. It is a book that tells you how to make your books. It can reproduce itself, almost like a bacterium or an organism. It can multiply, it contains self-description, contains its own information. And again, just to put my money where my mouth is, here is 2 pages from the book I printed on a simple printing press, and including here a page from the book about how to make a simple printing press that was itself printed using a primitive printing press. That there is this book reproducing itself almost like a robot. So know that on the back of any published book, there's always an author photograph, probably something a bit like this. So you're trying to make yourself look quite intelligent, you're quite smart with yourself, you just make that whole book. And I wanted even this author photograph on the back of the knowledge to remain true to the premise of the book. I wanted to make a photograph from scratch myself. I wanted to take a selfie in the deepest, most profound sense to ever take a selfie and making it myself. So I went down to a lake called Abbey in the south of England, where photography was invented. The very first, some of the very first photographs were taken, and I worked with a photographic historian there to take my own photograph, to make my own portrait. And these are the photographs here that you can see. And you probably noticed that I don't look very happy. I look a bit glum, a bit brown a bit in my photograph. The reason for this is no snapshot. This isn't like taking out your phone and click and having an instant photograph. This very simple silver-containing chemistry responds pretty slowly to sunlight. So the photo you can see there is a 15-second exposure. And it is impossible to sit absolutely still for 15 seconds, holding a natural smile without your face shifting or relaxing, or your body moving. The tiniest movement throws your entire body into a blur with a 15-second exposure. So you can't smile, you have to hold a very neutral, passive, glum-looking expression. And also what you can't see is that behind me during that photo, there is a skull cap locked into the back of my head, holding my skull perfectly still in the sand, in a cloud. And so that is the reason I'm looking a little bit glum for my author photograph for the knowledge for this book. And again, I've got that selfie with me here as a physical artifact, something that I have made. You can see it here. There's a reflection of the webcam there. That is the selfie that I took using very basic silver-containing chemistry that I made from scratch. In principle, you could take this photograph using a glass lens made from your own Robinson Crusoe experiment, using that interlinking and joining different technologies together. Now, if you were to take this thought experiment seriously, you really did think the world was about to end. You knew that an apocalypse was coming. Maybe you'd spotted an asteroid or a comet on a collision course with the Earth. You've got 6 months to prepare before civilization has collapsed and the vast majority of humanity is wiped out. What you might want to do is try to prepare the sum total of human knowledge into a set of libraries dotted around the world, a total library that contains all of not just theoretical understanding, but practical knowledge. Most of the books about carpentry or medicine or dentistry and materials and substances, how to make and do things for yourself. But actually trying to make a total library or a library in this way using traditional books, using paper, like I showed you here, perhaps isn't ideal because paper itself deteriorates and degrades. It can burn if a fire spreading through the abandoned cities. If it gets a bit too wet, it will moulder and destroy. But with modern technology, we've actually got a better alternative in many ways to a physical library stuffed full of lots of paper. But with a modern electronic device, modern e-reader, something like a Kindle, you can load onto the digital memory of that device 10,000 books, a library of human knowledge, all that fits as the palm of your hand. You can hold human knowledge in the palm of your hand. The problem with this, of course, is if the apocalypse ever then does arrive, the grid goes down, you won't be able to recharge your thinking, you won't be able to plug it into the mains to recharge it. And you'll have that knowledge in the palm of your hand, but your device is now dead. You've got no way of recharging it. So again, as another fun project, when I was researching and writing this book, I created for myself an apocalypse-proof Kindle, which I've got here. I've taken my Kindle and I've wired it into some scavenged solar panels, which I then wired into the back, into the charging port, the base of this Kindle, so you can keep it constantly recharged, like leading out into the sun. And I've loaded onto this Kindle 10,000 books that I think would be most useful for starting again, including my own book, The Knowledge, and this idea of how you can go back to scratch and make and do everything for yourself. And I think if this has been of interest to you, this notion of self-reliance and fabricating, constructing, designing, making things yourself. There's the book, there's an instructions. How you can do this as a maker project with your children, perhaps, for a nice summer weekend, and do this outside a barbecue. And there are other articles on the website that explore this idea more generally about resilience and making and manufacturing and crafting and ingenuity, and all of these aspects which are right at the core of Fab Lab and Fab 16 as a conference, as a festival. Going right back to mid-18th century with Dennis Diderot and one of the earliest encyclopedias that was written specifically to preserve human knowledge in case of a collapsed civilization, in case what happened to the Roman Empire happened to civilization in the mid-18th century. They tried to preserve all that was known at the time. Right up to the modern age, for example, Marcin Jakubowski's Global Village Construction Set was also talking at this Fab 16 festival. So there's a lot of extra material you can explore on the book's website. But thank you ever so much for me once again this opportunity to talk to you at Fab 16 about my own personal project, about how you can go back to basics and make things from scratch with your own hands. Thank you ever so much.